Is this thing on? Welcome back to Big Mouth, and fancy seeing you here, and you are very welcome, my friends, and especially my enemies. Come in, sit down, no touching. I don't do the touching. Are you feeling charitable? Then smash the subscribe button and the like button and the share button, and please do follow me on Twitter at Movies TV Mad. Well, the Watchman creator has never been shy about coming forward about his disdain of the comic book industry and the movie industry. He hates Hollywood. He's been burnt by them and comic book companies so many times, and he's just not interested in them. But he's done a rare interview with Deadline. The reason for this, he's promoting something that he's doing. Now, let's see what he's got to say. Very, very interesting interview, by the way. I was reading it, and I was just really captivated by what he's got to say. He's very blatant. And I love his honesty. I'm not so interested in comic books anymore. I don't want anything to do with them. I have been doing comics for 40-something years when I finally retired. When I entered the comics industry, the big attraction was that this was a medium that was vulgar. It had been created to entertain working class people, particularly children. The way that the industry has changed, it's graphic novels now. It's entirely priced for an audience of the middle class people. I have nothing against middle class people, but it wasn't meant to be a medium for middle-aged hobbyists. It was meant to be a medium for people who haven't got much money. Most people equate comics with superhero movies now. That adds another layer of difficulty for me. I haven't seen a superhero movie since the first Tim Burton Batman film. They have blighted cinema and also blighted culture to a degree. Several years ago, I said I thought it was a really worrying sign that hundreds of thousands of adults were queuing up to see characters that were created 50 years ago to entertain 12-year-old boys. That seemed to speak to some kind of longing to escape from the complexities of the modern world and go back to a nostalgic remembered childhood. That seemed dangerous. It was infantile. Well, I don't even know that word. It was infantilizing. I suppose he's saying it's childish for adults to go and watch movies. It was I need to read this word. It was infantilizing the population. Right. Let me tell you what I think about this before we carry on with this interview. To say that escapism is dangerous in itself. I can put my hand on my heart and say to you right here, right now, exclusively, if there wasn't a medium for me to escape through my favourite TV dramas and my favourite movies, I probably would have killed myself a long time ago. I hate reality. I hate the real world. It is not a good world. We need an escape. What do you want us to do? Talk about Donald Trump 24/7? We need an escape. Deadline. You said you feel responsible for how comics have changed. Why? More. It was largely my work that attracted an adult audience. It was the way that was commercialized by the comics industry. There were tons of headlines saying that comics had grown up, but other than a couple of particular individual comics, they really hadn't. The thing that happened with graphic novels in the 1980s, people wanted to carry on reading comics as they always had, and they could now do it in public and still feel sophisticated because they weren't reading a children's comic. It wasn't seen as subnormal. You didn't get the huge advances in adult comic books that I was thinking we might have, as witnessed by the endless superhero films. He really does hate superhero films, doesn't he? Listen, one thing I will say about what he's saying about superhero films, I actually agree with him. I think they have destroyed and blighted the industry, not because of the films themselves, because what Hollywood's done, because there's so much money in it now, they're literally only making superhero movies, and they're the only things that are making money because that's how they've directed the consumer and the audience to do so. I remember growing up in the 80s and the 90s, and there was a variety of film. We still had the odd superhero film, but it wasn't about that. So I understand what Moore is attempting to say. But of course, I'm a big superhero movie fan, but it has gone too far now. We all must admit that. Moore. Hang on, Deadline. What's your take on the comics industry now? This is interesting. I doubt the major companies will be coming out of lockdown in any shape at all. The mainstream comics industry is about 80 years old and it has lots of pre-existing health conditions. It wasn't looking that great before COVID happened. Most of our entertainment industries have been a bit top-heavy for a while. The huge corporations, businesses, interests have so much money they can produce these gigantic blockbusters of one sort or another that will dominate their markets. I can see that changing and perhaps for the better. It's too early to make optimistic predictions, but you might hope that the bigger interests will find more difficult to maneuver in this new landscape. Whereas the smaller independent concerns might find that they are a bit more adaptive. These times might be an opportunity for genuinely radical and new voices to come to the fore in the absence of the yesteryear. Is he right here? I don't know. Because, look, in terms of blockbuster movies, you can just transfer them to streaming. And we've seen that with The Boys. The Green Lantern show that I did a video about on today's DC Multiverse Daily. I don't think superhero blockbusters are going away anytime soon. But, when you think about Joker and Logan, they were an interesting way of doing superhero movies. And maybe that's what he's kind of talking about. But clearly, look, this guy, they fucked this guy too many times. Was it The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen he did? That film with Sean Connery. If that's the one he did, that's a terrible movie. So I can understand why he's pissed off. The economic realities and lack of support for the arts could hamper that. That's Deadline. More, that is undeniable. I'm talking in the long term. There's going to be an awful lot of economic pain for everybody before this is over. I'm not even sure it ever will technically be over until we've reached a better stage of the equilibrium. Whatever that turns out to be, when that was attained, I hope we might see a very different landscape culturally. I don't think that we will. I agree with him. Listen, I want to see more radical voices writing this stuff and making these films. But unfortunately, we're in an era now where people are quite happy to go to the cinema and watch a watered-down Spider-Man, where, when we think about the first Spider-Man feature film and the second one, Spider-Man and Spider-Man 2, I think they had something to say, and I think they were really good films, something different there. But now we're watering down Peter Parker, and he's just a guy that young girls fancy, and that's a shame. Deadline, do you watch no superhero movies at all? What about something a bit offbeat like Joker? You wrote a key Batman comic book. More. Oh, Christ, no, I don't watch any of them. All of these characters have been stolen from their original creators. Wow. All of them. They have a long line of ghosts standing behind them. In the case of Marvel films, Jack Kirby, the Marvel artist and writer, I have no interest in superheroes. They were a thing that was invented in the late 1930s for children, and they are perfectly good as children's entertainment. I don't agree with him here. But if you try to make them for the adult, well, then I think it becomes a kind of grotesque. Again, I couldn't disagree stronger with you, Alan. I understand that you're offended that these things were stolen from the original creators. I hate what DC did to the Superman creators, right? Siegel and Schuster. I think it was disgusting. They gave them $1 for their property or $200 or whatever it was. So that it is, I understand. I agree with you, Alan. But the point of saying that turning superheroes for adults is grotesque, I don't agree with you. I think that superheroes should be a place, personally, superhero movies, this is my opinion, and I think there should be a variety now because you've got to evolve. And these things are evolving, Alan, from your day. Maybe it's your age that's kind of made you feel this way. But I do want to see parents sit there and watch Shazam together. But then I want to see young men and young women. Hang on a minute, I've got to pop up. Jesus Christ, go away. I can't believe that. You can't see it. A Lenovo pop-up just came up as I was talking. Right, I'll start again. I love that Shazam families went to see Shazam, but I also love the fact that young men and young women young adults went to see the Joker. Because I think in terms of having an iconic comic book villain making commentary about male mental health and mental health in general was a very good statement and a statement well told. And I think that's important. Here's more again. I've been told the Joker film wouldn't exist without my Joker story, 1988's Batman the Killing Joke. But 3 months after I'd written that, I was disowning it. It was far too violent. It was Batman. It was Batman for Christ's sake. It's a guy dressed as a bat. Increasingly, I think the best version of Batman was Adam West, which didn't take it all seriously. We have a kind of superhero character in the show, but we get the chance to develop them more than people will be able to see. All of the characters have quite unusual aspects to them. He's basically a TV show called Show, and this is why he's doing the interview. He's selling it, obviously, isn't he? So let's start again. So did he do Killing Joke? I've been told the Joker film wouldn't exist without my Joker story, 88's Batman the Killing Joke. So he wrote that, right? But then he's saying it was too violent. But you wrote it, mate. You're slaughtering yourself. I love Adam West's Batman TV series as well. But it doesn't have to be the only way it's done. There can be a variety for a variety of audiences. I think you're wrong about adults enjoying superheroes, Alan. They grew up with them. They want to carry on. As you say, it reminds them of their youth. What is wrong with that? This is the kind of thing we had with the fallout of The Last Jedi, where the alt-left were saying, Star Wars is just a space story for kids, right? And that's the excuse for doing something bland and uninteresting, and not even kids liked it, right? So I tell you, I don't agree with you, Alan, and I'm very passionate about that. But it's your opinion, and you're entitled to it. Deadline: hasn't cinema always been a form of escapism to an extent? Totally, not just to an extent. Totally. More. Sometimes it was. All art forms are potentially, but they can be used for something other than escapism. Think of all the films that have really challenged assumptions, films that have been difficult to take on board, disturbing in their messages. The same goes for literature, but these superhero films are too often escapism. Again, Alan, I have to call you up on this. I love those films that make a big statement, like JFK and Born on the 4th of July, etc., etc. But it shouldn't just be, that shouldn't be the norm. It shouldn't just be about those films. We should have those films, and I think the superhero model and, fanaticism, the superhero movie fanaticism has taken those kind of statement films away from us, and I resent that as well. But I don't think it should just be a place for films like that. There should be a place for those films and for escapism. Escapism is very important. And to tell an audience you should be focused on the real world and never escape is a very, very dangerous thing to do. That's why there's so much depression and suicide now. Because every time we go on social media, it's politics, the real world this, the real world that. People moaning about this, people moaning about that. People can't handle it. It's too much. It's too much darkness for the psyche to handle. With regards to the show, which is what he's doing, I think it's an interesting case in point. I'm known perhaps a bit unfairly for creating dystopias. I think I've done one or two, but the rest are just my reflections on the world as I see it. With the show, it could be very well be argued that it is actually set in a dystopia, in that Northampton is the first British town in something like 35 years to collapse into an economic black hole. We went into special measures in the early months of 2018. We can only afford skeleton services. They are now talking about breaking it up and into two different voting areas. Wow, very, very interesting, right? So he's talking about Northampton. And then he goes to talk about himself and his show. I don't really want to talk about that. When it happens, is it a comic book? Is it actually a show? I don't know. What I'm focused on is how he feels about these movies. And what I will say is when someone turns around to me and says, and he hasn't said this to me, but when I read an interview and someone says escapism is wrong, adults enjoying escapism is wrong, adults watching superheroes that were meant for children in the 1930s is wrong. You see, this is what the internet now and all forms of interviews, it's all about an opinion, and everyone keeps talking like they're speaking facts. Everyone has their own truths. Jesus Christ. I was introduced to Superman as a 10-year-old boy, and I've had that character in my heart all my life. As I said, without that character, I probably would have killed myself as a schoolboy. Many, many learning difficulties. I felt nobody understood me. I felt my family were ashamed of me. So it was very, very difficult for me to feel loved, and I'm sure I was loved, but it didn't feel that way, and I didn't fit in. I didn't have many friends, and Superman was my friend. He's not a real character, but it's really important. It's when I lived in a bedsit on my own, and I was depressed, and I didn't have any work, and I was watching Smallville. I thought those characters were my friends, even though They're fictional and they're not real. But escapism and fiction can help us. And when people say we should be totally in the real world, it's like the debate where some people in the modern world will say, if you tell your children Santa Claus exists, you're lying to them. Yes, you are. But I will repeat a quote, and it's very apt to what Alan Moore's been saying here. I will give you a quote from Miracle on 34th Street and the John Hughes one, the remake. I would ask you, what's worse? A truth that draws a tear, or a lie that draws a smile? It's good. I love that quote from that film. It's okay. It's okay to believe in mystical figures that are not real. It's okay to think they're true. And then when you get older, you find out that they're not. It didn't destroy me when I found out Santa Claus wasn't real, because somewhere in the back of my mind, he still was, in the fantasy element, in the escapist element. It's okay. It's okay to watch those films about Santa Claus. It's okay to watch The Grinch. It's okay to embrace Christmas. Even as an adult, I am slaughtered for starting my celebrations early, from September, listening to the music and watching the films. But that's the way I feel good, especially this year. Christmas makes me feel all warm, and it makes me feel happy and content. That's why I start early. That's why I watch all the movies. It's a beautiful thing. And to tell people just to live in the real world is highly damaging. Comment down below, like, share and subscribe, and I'll be back tomorrow with more videos. See you again soon. Escapism is a thing. Never let anyone shame you in not having an escape. It's so important psychologically and mentally. Thank you very much.